Hi, I'm Carrie Booth. This is Scott.
McAdoo.
And we are talking about used EVs and how great it is to start your first EV experience with a used EV. I didn't take my own advice. My first EV I bought brand new. It was a 2007 Zap Zebra. It had 3 wheels. It was a 3-wheel motorcycle. It was governed at 40 miles per hour, but it was a car in it that had a fiberglass body, 4 doors, 4 seatbelts, no airbags. You do not drive that on the freeway. And it was $10,000 brand new. It was my midlife crisis car. It had zebra stripes. It was awesome. I drove a glorified golf cart, that car, had a 20-mile range, rapidly degrading lead acid batteries, and I drove it for 8 years. Took the kids to school. They both learned to drive that thing, kept them from going too fast. And I loved it, but it was very poorly made, falling apart, couldn't get parts by the end, and I gave it away to a good home at the end, somebody who's a hobbyist. My second car, taking my own advice, buy a used EV, 2012 Mitsubishi IMI EV, 62-mile range, 4-hole wheels, airbags, seats 4, freeway speeds, huge cargo space with the back seats down, 50 cubic feet. It's tall but narrow, fits in my tiny garage in my 1890 house. And it was $9,000 at Clackamas CarMax. The week that I just could no longer keep the Zap going anymore, this car shows up, and it now is 12 years old, and there's no battery degradation. It's lithium ion. It still has a 62-mile range. It is great around town. I don't plug it in every night because I just look and say, oh, what's tomorrow like? What's my driving like tomorrow? Okay, maybe it's a big day. I'll plug it in tonight. By morning, 110 outlet, no problem. Totally back up to my 62-mile range. So I think in terms of, I'm always telling people, I think I've sold 7 cars for Platt Auto Group so far. They send me like a gift card in the mail every now and then. Keep it coming. They have almost all the brands. They don't have a Mitsubishi i-MiEV. It's a very rare car. I'm one of the few people that thought this minimalist vehicle was the best thing. And I still think it's the best thing. But most people might be more interested in a Chevy Bolt, 250-mile range. I helped a friend buy one there. It was 2020. He bought a 2017, $16,500. Platt has a great website. They tell you what's on the lot now, how many miles on it, what year, what's the estimated range. People, I think, buying used often will worry about, oh, how much degradation is there in the battery, because it might be different. And what I've been told is that if you can avoid buying one from the Southwest, where it got way too hot, they finally figured out, and it took a few years, that heat was really the early death of batteries. My car came from Seattle. So Pacific Northwest, we don't have as much to worry about in that way. But it's so fun to drive an EV. They're quiet, amazing pickup. You learn very quickly, and I learned with the Zap, with the 20-mile range rapidly degrading, everywhere there's an outlet. Always had the cord with me. Every friend knew. I was like, can I go through your living room window from your driveway? Not a problem. I worked at Reed College. I'm a retired biologist, and I asked permission to charge on campus. They have those little Cushman cart things, and so there were plugs. I charged up on campus daily, in order to get home again, 3.5 miles there, charge it 3.5 miles back. But so it's just a whole game changer having a real EV, but not paying $20,000, which was, the Mitsubishi was around $22,000 when it was new. They don't sell them anymore, but you can still find used ones online. You might have to have it shipped here, and it might be from a warmer climate, so you want to think about that. So that's my EV trajectory. I wanted a glorified golf cart. I got one. I enjoyed it for 8 years, but it was falling apart. Couldn't get parts. upgraded to this Mitsubishi, I think if this one dies or has an accident or something where I can't continue it, I think I would go with a Chevy Bolt, would be my next most minimalist vehicle that you can still buy in this country that is 250-mile range. So that's my story. And we want to leave lots of time for questions. So Scott's going to tell you his story.
Okay. I'm Scott. I am a much newer owner than she is. I previously was driving a 2000 Toyota Tundra pickup. Got a whopping 12 miles per gallon in the city. It would drop to 10 in bumper-to-bumper traffic. And I can maybe eke out like 16, maybe 17 if I was on the freeway going gas station to gas station to gas station. It decided to give up its transmission one night, coming out of Portland. And so while I was waiting for it to get fixed, I went out and rented an EV because I was EV curious, was interested in what they were, how they drove, whether it would work for me. One of the reasons that I rented first is because I'm one of those people that the media says should not own an electric car. I live in a condo. I don't have my own garage where I can park it and plug in every night. I have to rely on level 2, level 3 charging that's public. Okay, so if you read certain media, you find out that that's going to be a nightmare for you. I can attest that it's not. It's pretty easy here. It's not a problem whatsoever. But took that car, drove that EV for about 500 miles. One of the days in that, I do a lot of transportation for other people, people who don't drive. I had a day where I had to drive from Beaverton, where I live, out to Gresham to pick someone up, take them from Gresham out to Hillsborough, and then an appointment, and then from Hillsborough back out to Gresham and back to Beaverton. Yes, that means I got to drive across Portland 4 times in rush hour traffic. It sucked. But in the EV, it's got all the smart cruise control, all that stuff. Basically turned all that stuff on. The car drove most of the way back and forth. When I was done, I calculated how much it cost to charge and what that trip cost me. It was about $4 in charging. Okay. Then I sat down with the numbers for my truck at 12 miles per gallon. That same day in my truck, A, would have been exhausting because of just having to drive it, but B, it would have been about $38 to $40. Okay, that's substantially different than what the EV cost. At the end of the week of renting the EV, I'd put about 500 miles on it. Measured out my costs, I'd spent about $20 in charging. My truck would have been like $175. Double that to 1,000 miles a month, all of a sudden I'm looking at my gas costs of about $350 a month just for my normal life. That's a car payment, for God's sakes. That's a car payment. Yeah. I got some news. That's why I went used, because that's less than my car payment. She mentioned Platt Auto. They're amazing people. I had whittled down my search that I knew I either wanted a Kia Niro, because I liked how it drove, or a Chevy Bolt, or a Nissan Leaf, or the Hyundai Kona. Those are the 4 that are kind of in the same price range. They all have anywhere from about 200 to 250 miles of range, and they can all be found on the used market pretty easily. So started searching, eventually landed at Platt. I got to tell you, I've owned like 25 vehicles over the course of my life. If there's one thing I absolutely hate, it's walking into a car dealership. Can't stand it. I just don't want to deal with it. So found out where Platt was, that they had all these models. And it's a car dealership on McLaughlin, which is not known for really good places to buy a car. And I'm like, oh God, this is gonna suck, but I can do it. And I went there and they were amazing. They were awesome. They were kind, zero pressure. They were like, okay, here's our price list. These are the cars we have. Get you the keys for whatever you wanna drive. And I was that guy. I could not make up my mind. I eventually eliminated the Leaf because of the lack of proper thermal protection on the battery. That's a big thing. That's what causes that degradation. The Kona is exactly mechanically the same as the Niro, except it's got a much smaller back seat. I've got an adult daughter who will not ride in the front seat for any reason, so she has to ride in the back. It's like, okay, I have to have a back seat big enough for an adult. That eliminated the Kona. That came down to a Bolt, and it came down to the Nero. The Neros, all of them come with the full suite of what's called ADAS, the Active Driver Assistance Systems, the Smart Cruise Control, front collision warning, all of that stuff. That's what I decided to go with because those are extra in the Bolt. The sales process was super easy. The one that I finally settled on, they had 4 of the same model, drove all of them, examined all of them, ended up being $19,000 for a used car. I've got the original window sticker on it. It was a $41,000 car. I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
Due to my taxes, I did qualify for the $4,000 incentive. I got a 2020 vehicle with 30-some thousand miles on it for 15 grand that's got the full suite of safety stuff. It is EPA registered as 240 mile range. It's actually, I mean, I've never seen 240 miles of range. It's either 250 to 300 right now. I have 0 complaints. Of all the cars I've bought, this is like fun to drive.
Yeah.
I used to have a little Porsche 914. This is as fun to drive. It's a whole lot more safe, and it's a whole lot more reliable than that Porsche. So that's my story. I put together this lovely presentation last night of talking about battery degradation, fire risk, all of this sort of stuff. It's too much. So at this point,
questions,
it's about 11:15.
Right?
We got
lots of time.
Yeah, about 10 minutes for questions about anything. You guys, how many of you are current owners of an electric vehicle? Okay, you guys? Okay, about half.
Yeah.
And how many of you are actively looking or thinking about it?
Sweet.
As I say, EV curious, right on.
Yeah. I have your comment about where to charge, how to charge. So my IMEV fits in my tiny garage, and I have a dedicated outlet just because it was handy. I was having some electrical work done for other reasons. I have solar panels on my house, so it's a solar-powered car. I have enough to do the house plus the car, but I have a dedicated outlet, just 20 amp circuit. It's easy. Well, I had a friend with a 2017 Bolt, and he bought it in 2020 right before he got too sick to drive anymore. So I was maintaining the Bolt and driving in places in it sometimes, and I had to run a line across the sidewalk. It is illegal in Portland to run a 110 extension cord across the sidewalk with a protector. I have seen people with homemade level 2 out in the parking strip, better to ask forgiveness than permission kind of situations. I've always admired them, but I'm not that brave, and I can't do it myself, so you couldn't get an electrician to do that illegally. I don't need level 2 charging with the 220 volts for a 62-mile range car. For a 250-mile range car, it was occasionally would have been handy, but still, if you plan your trips, and then you plug in with 110, that works just fine. And then public charging does exist. You know, if you pay $5 to park at the Memorial Coliseum, the charging's free. That's a tip.
Well, $5.
So yeah, there are still some places where you can charge for free. And yeah, question?
So as an early adopter, you've heard every objection, every question.
Yes.
What are the objections you're still hearing today that you can't believe people are saying?
Well, you know, before you've experienced it, everybody's got range anxiety, but you get to know your car. And this is one of the reasons I say, start with a used EV. See how it's working for you. You know, you might start with the cheapest one on the lot. Maybe it's a really old Nissan Leaf and maybe it has an 80-mile range. Play with that. See what that can do for you around town and decide maybe that's really what you need, is that's your minimalist vehicle that does what you need around town. Then, if you want to leverage up to a 250-mile like Chevy Bolt or Kia Niro, then you know, well, this is why we need this car, because we want to be able to go to Seattle and back. We want to be able to go to the coast, to the mountains, and sort of kind of leverage up from there. And take on. It is an added thing to figure out, but there are lots of great apps. PlugShare is a great app. There's some others that tell you where's the next charging station, how many plugins does it have, are they currently in use? So you can map out your whole trip ahead of time, being a little bit flexible in case you get there and it's not working, or there's one down the street that is open right now. So there are ways to do the longer trips, and I'm sure people with long-range vehicles have that experience. Yeah. Question?
How do you establish battery degradation in an existing used car?
Well, in terms of what I'm seeing in my car, when it's fully charged, so it goes up to 16 bars, it says 62 or 65, or it even says 70 some days. You know, it partly is dependent on temperature. In the winter, you're not going to get as many miles per charge because the batteries are less efficient charging at those low temperatures. Of course, super high temperature isn't good for them either in terms of longevity. But I was going to Clackamas CarMax going, how much battery degradation am I willing to accept? And then I realized it's fully charging. And that was 4 years old, and now it's 12 years old, and it's still fully charging and giving me those miles.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways that you can do it when you're searching for a new car. Every car has what is called, affectionately, the guessometer, the GOM. It is the gauge that shows where your charge is and roughly how many miles you can expect out of it. That GOM is influenced by the previous owner, how they drove. If you get a car that spent a whole lot of time on the freeway going back and forth at 70 to 80 miles an hour, its range is going to appear lower than a car that is in bumper-to-bumper traffic, because electrics are great at bumper-to-bumper traffic. And your efficiency goes way up when you're in bumper-to-bumper traffic. So you can kind of look at that GOM and get an idea of where the battery charge is. Charging it once to 100%, you can see where the range is compared to the EPA. That'll give you a rough ballpark. Do any of you know what an OBD2 is?
No.
Okay, when you pull into the DEQ in a gas car and the guy comes out and you open the door and you get out, he sticks something into your car. It's called the OBD2 port. It's a little port that's built into all cars except Teslas, and you can buy a dongle off of Amazon for anywhere from 10 to 80 bucks, and you plug it in there and you pull an app on your phone called Car Scanner. And you start Car Scanner and you connect to the OBD2 dongle, and you can read everything a mechanic can read off of that car. So I did not do this when I bought mine, but I've helped a couple of other people buying them now, where it's like, okay, this is the OBD2 dongle, this is how you use it, this is what you do. And like mine, it pulls up, it tells me the state of health for my battery. State of health is reading at 100% right now. The Kia and the Hyundais have what's called a buffer on the battery. So the actual battery is bigger than what it's rated at. My battery is actually 67.5 or so kilowatts, though I only get to use 64. So it can degrade quite a bit before it actually affects my range. Most newer cars are kind of built that way. The thing that really affects degradation is, as Carrie said, is heat. And that's a qualified statement because new chemistries are coming out. New batteries are always coming out. Some of the Teslas, some of the Fords, they use a thing called a lithium iron phosphate battery. They're not as powerful as lithium ion regular, but they're more resistant to heat and they're less fire prone. So they're a great thing. There's rumors of what are called solid state batteries coming out. Those things are amazing. They've got great energy density. They're less resistant to heat and damage like that and degradation. And there's zero fire risk. Those are coming. Some people are always waiting for the Holy Grail. Toyota's been announcing they're going to start their solid-state battery plant any day now for 15 years. I'm sure it'll be online someday.
Yeah, being an early adopter, I had the attitude that somebody's got to go first. Somebody's got to keep the ball rolling. I got my first solar panels in 2008 on my house, just a few, what I could afford at the time. And my friends said, "What's the payback time on those solar panels?" And I said, "Didn't you just buy a new car recently? What's the payback time on Oh, you wanted to drive that car around." I wanted to have solar panels. In 2019, I did the rest of the roof. Solar panels had come way down in price. The incentives were great. They're still great. I also I volunteer for Oregon Electric Vehicles Association, Solar Oregon, nonprofit advocacy group for solar power, Electrify PDX, and there's an event this afternoon that I'm volunteering at 12 to 4 on Southeast 8th and Salmon. It's a building called The Red, REDD. So they're having an electrification event there. Free Ruby Jewel ice cream sandwiches. I will be handing them out. And I'm also a master recycler. I also pick up food for Urban Gleaners, which saves donated food and gets it to people in need very quickly and efficiently. So I'm a sustainability activist, retired biologist. I'm an early adopter, and it's fun for me to be an early adopter. My mom's comment about the little zebra car with the 20-mile range was like, nobody but you would do this. And I'm like, but it's coming. Real electric cars are coming. Question?
The OBT.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's something you should ask the dealer to do for you when you buy a car.
You could check. And a lot of dealers will have actually a battery health report. Any normal car dealer can do a battery health report. And I think Greg here has a statement.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'll add to that is that some dealers will do that, they'll connect it, and then they'll get a report from what's called Recurrent Auto, and that'll have like a whole report around the battery health. So
Sweet.
Recurrent Auto as well, and some dealers will have that hooked up to their system, and they'll show, okay, battery health is good or whatnot.
Nice. And then question over there?
No, I just knew the gentleman.
You were just pointing. Thanks. Double this guy.
The last thing I'll say about potential battery degradation is if you're buying any current model used car, it's not really something you have to worry about. Unless it was horribly abused or somehow malfunctioning. Pretty much every modern electric car has an 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty on the battery that will replace the battery if the degradation exceeds 70%, supposedly. So that will be up to your dealer. But degradation is not as big of a fear as it's been made out to be. You had a question?
You have a used car with 100,000 miles on it, and the battery checks out to be up to spec. What's the life expectancy of that battery?
I think we have a member who was an Uber driver, and I think he got 200,000 miles on a Leaf.
That comes into a very long description of what are called charge cycles. Every manufacturer, when your battery is made, it is rated for X number of charge cycles. That is, a charge cycle is going from 0% charge to 100%. That's one cycle. Going from 0 to 50 twice, that's one cycle. Going from 40 to 60, 5 times, that's one cycle. Every chemistry has its count of charge cycles. I can use my battery in my Kia Niro. It's got a 64 kilowatt battery. It's got the 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty. When I calculate everything out, Kia is saying this battery will not hit 70% degradation in 100,000 miles, and that will equal roughly 390 charge cycles. Okay, I can go 0 to 100, 390 times before that degradation hits. Okay, it gets more complicated. That's 390 times. I know manufacturers under independent testing have rated my battery at 500 charge cycles, that it should be good for that. That takes that mileage up to 128,000 before it degrades to a certain point. Keep in mind, degradation doesn't mean worthless. It just means less effective, less mileage.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
We're 5 minutes to the next presentation.
Yeah, we got to let them come in and set up. We can take questions out in the hallway.
Yeah, we can talk out in the hallway or outside. Okay. Thank you, guys.